You are listening to the Health and Wellness Connection podcast, the #1 wellness podcast designed to provide the latest information to help you achieve your health and wellness goals. Our show features exciting guests, the latest in medical research, and in-depth discussions in current trends on weight loss, nutrition, and fitness. No matter what your interest, the Health and Wellness podcast has you covered. And now, presenting your illustrious host, Dr. Barry, MD.
Hello and welcome back to the Health and Wellness Connection, or if you're a first timer, welcome to the Health and Wellness Connection. This is a health and wellness podcast where we focus on some of the most pressing and interesting news articles as well as research that comes out that may be beneficial for us to understand so we can improve our health and wellness. We focus on just, increased life expectancy, decreasing stress, things to do to help kind of make life easier, make your life a little healthier so that you can maybe live longer. That's always the goal when it comes to getting through this thing we call life. Now, again, we try to do this in an unbiased fashion. We're not sponsored. We, really love donations from fans. Have been few and far between, but we still continue to press on because we feel that we're doing something pretty special here. So guys, if you're interested in an independent health and wellness podcast, free of bias. Now, of course, have personal biases, but we're not influenced by any large corporations. So we're trying to provide information as plainly and honestly as possible. So if you like that, don't hesitate to support the show. You can support us via Cash App. The sign is Dr. Barry Health, $ Dr. Barry Health on Cash App. You can also do it via PayPal. The best way to do it is just to send us an email, and we can definitely tell you how you can contribute if you're interested in doing so. Email for the show is drbarryhealth@gmail.com. Again, that's drbarryhealth@gmail.com. And also, if you want to reach out to us just for anything, future show ideas, collaborations, those people who have sent already requests, we're looking through some of the items here, and we're going to definitely get back with you regarding some of the potential items we may be featuring on the show. So stay tuned for that. But yes, guys, we are very excited to give you some information here that I think will be very interesting. And we have a nice array of articles and news research to tell you about. Let's go and get started since we're already behind the ball here. All right, so the first story talks about the new FDA recommendations in regards to cannabis. Now, everyone knows that, on this show, we've talked about cannabis and some of the interesting medical research, and we've kind of really tried to keep you guys abreast of some of the things that cannabis is potentially doing in the medical space. Now, I do have a relationship with a cannabis corporation known as Black Star Farms based out in Los Angeles, California. So I've actually been privy to some of the really interesting ways that medical cannabis has helped people and how it's been used in various markets, particularly California, as well as Mississippi, Louisiana, and so forth. So I kind of have some insight in this topic. So this is something that has been on the pipeline for a while now, and it seems like there's some increased push now to make cannabis a more available drug or medication. And this is going to happen because the DEA, which is the Department of Drug Enforcement, they're the people who go and arrest folks who are having drugs or illegal, narcotics and whatnot, and other substances that are deemed unfit for human consumption. They have actually now put a recommendation, right? The Federal Drug Administration has now recommended the DEA move cannabis from Schedule 1, which is what it is now, which is, again, one of the most dangerous drugs available, to Schedule 3, which is, definitely less dangerous classification, allows it to be readily available, and it also paves the way for it to be potentially legalized. So this is kind of like something that has been talked about on the kind of underground circuits. Has been the stories of different articles and papers being constructed, but nothing has been officially announced or released. Now, this article actually came out from Bloomberg, and they stated that there was a 252-page report that was actually sent from the FDA to the DEA, and this happened in August 2023. Now, this was under wraps for a while. It wasn't actually released to the public, but an actual news reporter actually sued the FDA to get this to respond and publish the report publicly. So they finally did it about almost 6 months after it was purportedly created. And this article is interesting because it talks about how this drug, cannabis, which has been, center of so many controversies, should now be made Schedule 3. And this is something that is hopefully, to be done relatively soon. Now, it's been over a few years since President Joe Biden actually talked about potentially legalizing cannabis. This was, if you remember, he put actually a report where he actually went to the Department of Health and Human Services, asked them to review potential legalization route for cannabis in October of 2022. And, since then, we've really not heard much, but we've also, been told that cannabis will be getting legal once all the ramifications and all the different health issues and potential problems are ironed out. Now, of course, the conspiracy theorists have been stating that, well, there's probably some large forces, other industries blocking it and so forth. And that may be true, but there's no evidence to that. But ultimately, this report shows that there's a strong chance that cannabis will be descheduled and making it more readily available, as well as paving the way for potential legalization. Now, for those who are saying, cannabis potentially is not good, it's not something that should be readily available. Well, the reality is that there is a lot of actual medical benefits that many people who have been using cannabis to treat certain conditions have had success with. And so I think when you have something like that, even though, you could argue against it being used recreationally, and I think that's something that's fair because sometimes it can be abused. However, there are some medical benefits that have been proven cannabis has shown effectiveness in treating those conditions. So I think those people who suffer from those conditions should have access to it if they choose to use it. Some of the more common conditions that cannabis has been shown to actually have medical benefits include anorexia, anxiety, epilepsy, inflammatory bowel disease, nausea and vomiting, pain, PTSD. And guys, we've done shows on this as well, especially when it comes to CBD. You can go to the archives, you can look at the past shows we've done on cannabis and some of the studies that were done that showed some of the benefits for those conditions. So we won't go into that today, but yes, there are some medical benefits. And with this new FDA recommendation, maybe we'll start to see, cannabis potentially readily available for those who are, prescribed it or who may want to use it, especially in the medical setting. So yeah, interesting story. We're going to keep following that. And if it becomes officially announced, of course, we're going to report that as well here on the show. Now, speaking of medical cannabis, another study did come out actually that shows potential downside of cannabis and why it's not completely perfectly safe as some people like to purport that it is. Now, one thing about cannabis is that people who use it know that it can cause elevated heart rate. And there's now a study that comes out of the Netherlands stating that cannabis can actually increase the risk of developing an arrhythmia, which is, again, an abnormal heart rhythm. Now, of course, you don't want that. Arrhythmias can cause significant issues and lead you to other potential dangerous complications. But, when we're using things that can increase your heart rate, there's always a risk for potential irregular heart rates developing from that. So you got to be careful, guys. And especially if you have a risk or you have a history of an irregular heart rhythm, you may want to consider looking at other ways to address your concerns or may just want to keep away from cannabis as a drug. Now, this study that was done looked at about 5,300 people who had chronic pain. So these people were prescribed cannabis for chronic pain management, and they were looking at, what their side effects were during this process. And they did it for about 3 years, from 2018 to 2021. So they looked at these people and they matched them to about 26,000 people, who had a similar diagnosis, similar actual age and sex, but they weren't being treated with cannabis. They were being treated with other, maybe more traditional pain medications for also chronic pain. And what they found was that those who were on cannabis for chronic pain, they definitely used less narcotics and other pain medications, but they actually had a slightly increased risk of first-time arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation or atrial flutter, conduction disorders, tachycardias, and other things. So, now when we say the risk was increased, it wasn't extremely high risk, right? So the people who were using medical cannabis, they had a 0.8% increased risk, so less than 1%. But those who were not using cannabis had a 0.4% rate of those arrhythmias developing. So technically it was double the amount, if you look at it in a pure, comparison. However, overall, the rate was the incidence or the new cases were very, very low, less than 1%. So again, it's not absolute you're going to get an arrhythmia. Most cannabis users, the vast majority, literally 99% of them, will not have it based on this study percentages. So it's not outrageously high, but something to keep in mind. Now, if you're someone who's had an arrhythmia already, you've had atrial fibrillation, you've had some sort of weird tachycardia, cannabis potentially could increase that risk of it recurring. So you may want to consider other methods to treat whatever condition you're using cannabis for. So again, everything's not rosy. Cannabis definitely can have benefits. Overall, it's relatively safe. I mean, again, this risk, while increased, is still relatively low, but if there is a risk, so we have to definitely mention that. All right, so moving on, another interesting study that came across my desk looks at nicotine patches, e-cigarettes, and pregnancy. Now, we know that smoking is one of the most addictive things that someone can engage in. That's why we actually don't recommend smoking, especially when it comes to smoking tobacco. Smoking tobacco can definitely be addicting, and it can be hard to quit. And this has been something that OB-GYNs have suffered or dealt with for a while, because when someone becomes pregnant, and they're a smoker, getting them to quit smoking has always been a struggle. So there was concerns that, we know that when smokers, especially women who smoke, they tend to have babies who have lower birth weights. And it's believed that it's possible because of circulation being reduced or some sort of interference in the developmental process, causing babies to end up smaller. And smaller babies are typically sicker babies, so we don't want that. We want healthy babies, appropriate weight, and getting all the nutrients they need while they're in the womb. So when we see that smokers had smaller weights, it was definitely considered, not ideal for someone to be smoking. So OB-GYNs, who are, again, doctors who deal with pregnant women, they've been trying to figure out the best way to manage women who may be addicted to smoking and getting them off of the cigarettes. And so, of course, nicotine patches and e-cigarettes with low dose of nicotine have been proposed as a way to wean women off of cigarettes, especially during pregnancy. So a study was conducted to see, okay, if we put these women on e-cigarettes and nicotine patches to help get them off of cigarettes, is there an increased risk of this low birth weight we see with women who smoke? And the belief is that maybe it's nicotine that's the primary reason that women who are smoking tend to have these complications with pregnancy. And so what they found was that, and actually, before we get into what they found, let's remember we have to give shots out to the researchers. Very important, I like to do that on my show. And this actually came out of Queen Mary University of London, and it was actually funded by the NIH, which is their national research center, a group that helps researchers get their work out. Professor Peter Hajek of the Wolfson Institute, actually. And the interesting thing is that they have access to a huge database. So everyone who comes through the NIH system, their records are available for research. So they can go through all the data and look at, use cases or different behaviors and look at outcomes based on how patients progress. So this group of researchers looked at pregnant women who were using e-cigarettes and nicotine patches during pregnancy. And they were monitoring birth rates as well as, baby weights and whatnot. And it was pretty interesting. And they have access to thousands of charts, obviously, millions actually. Now, what they found was that overall, when looking at the data, that e-cigarettes and nicotine patches are relatively safe in pregnancy, primarily because the weights of the babies to mothers who were using e-cigarettes and nicotine patches were actually fine and actually much higher than women who were smoking cigarettes during pregnancy. So it seems that nicotine is not extremely harmful for pregnancy to pregnant women. It's particularly the other tars and toxins in cigarettes that is believed to be causing some of the complications we're seeing in pregnancy. So, if you're someone who is pregnant and you're craving cigarettes, I'm not saying you should do them. You should probably try to avoid smoking anything. We're not even sure all the toxins in vapes and whether or not all of it's safe. What we do know is that it's much safer than cigarettes, actual, traditional cigarettes. Far less toxins are seen to be in vapes and other e-cigarettes as opposed to traditional cigarettes. So it's definitely recommended if you're someone who just cannot, hold yourself and you're smoking because, you can't help yourself. You definitely want to consider e-cigarettes or nicotine patches if you have to get your nicotine fix now. So, and, it's kind of, interesting because We still don't know everything that's in these vapes. So, recommending a vape is kind of tricky still, but it's far better than smoking. So if you're seeing someone or you're someone who just cannot stop smoking, you want to consider using a vape if you're pregnant. Now, obviously, you want to talk to OB-GYN, let them know what's going on and see if they can help you figure out ways to consider quitting if you're pregnant. But yeah, this study is interesting because, with this data, it seems like vapes may be a actually effective and safe way to, treat women who are addicted to nicotine and who can't help themselves and cannot stop smoking during pregnancy. And it seems like you have safer, better outcomes, with these women throughout their pregnancy course. So interesting data, and we'll definitely be following as far as this whole e-cigarettes and whether or not, they are something that pregnant women would consider if they're, unable to stop smoking during pregnancy. Another study on smoking, and this actually deals with men. This study actually looked at association of smoking with increased risk for hair loss. Now, of course, hair loss is a big deal. A lot of men, when they undergo hair loss, many things can be affected, including their self-esteem, overall way they see themselves, and, can be a place of serious concern. So you have a lot of people going for hair transplant surgeries, people doing all kinds of things to help increase their hair availability and hair amounts. So things to prevent hair loss is something that has been very highly focused on in the healthcare space because people care about their hair. And it seems like smoking may be associated with increased risk for developing hair loss, or especially in men. We know men tend to lose their hair more often than women. And there's a condition known as androgenetic alopecia, which is some sort of association with the male genetics that leads to them to lose their hair much quicker. You have people going through, male pattern baldness in their 20s and 30s, and it can be hard on the self-esteem of people who suffer this. So finding reasons why this happens has been of high interest to the medical community. So a researcher looked at, people who smoked, looked at, hair losses and tried to see if there was association. This was particularly, lead author of this one was Adhyata Gupta, MD, PhD, professional medicine at University of Toronto. And they looked at, patients with male pattern baldness, and they tried to see if there was association with smoking. Actually went through the research databases and looked at about 10 different studies that had already approached this kind of question and looked at the numbers, looked at their data, and they were able to form their own data based on these other data. So in research, this is called a meta-analysis, where you don't actually do the research yourself as far as having the people come in and do all the work. You're actually looking at other people's research that have similar kind of, studies, and you just compare the data, and you kind of can make a general kind of summation as long as the researchers are fairly similar. And so they looked at other studies that had looked at smoking and hair loss already, and they found that based on the studies they looked at, there was almost a 2 times increase, like a 2x. So twice as likely of getting male pattern baldness if you smoked compared to those who did not smoke. And they looked at amount of cigarettes, and they found that those who smoked 10 or more cigarettes a day were about twice as likely to develop this, male pattern baldness or androgenetic alopecia. So, 10 cigarettes a day is, pretty, good amount, about half a pack. So if you're someone who's losing your hair and you're smoking a pack a day, you're probably gonna lose all your hair. So I think studies like this, where they look at multiple studies, can be very powerful because you're kind of getting a lot of data, you're analyzing a lot of data very quickly. So, male pattern baldness is something that, has really puzzled a lot of people, especially the medical community. But we do know that circulation to your blood, to your hair cells is very important. We do know smoking can reduce your circulation, cause those tiny blood vessels to constrict, reducing blood flow. And this is a good way to lose your hair, apparently, based on what we suspect is some sort of blood flow restrictions to the hair follicles. So guys, if you want to keep your hair longer and you're already suffering from baldness, you're losing hair, you definitely want to consider stopping smoking if you do. So yeah. All right, the next study looks at multivitamins and cognition. So multivitamins have been something that we've talked about before, and there's some controversy back and forth whether multivitamins are critical or essential for a healthy lifestyle. I think personally, a well-balanced diet is the most effective way to get your nutrients Eating those fruits and vegetables, nuts, legumes, occasional meats. Those are the best way to get all your vitamins. But if you're someone who's been slacking in certain areas, you're not getting that, good dietary intake, well-balanced meals, multivitamins can be an excellent way to replace some of those vitamin deficiencies that could develop from poor diet. But it definitely doesn't replace a good diet, bottom line. But either way, this study looks at multivitamin supplementation and what are some of the benefits long term. They looked at actually multiple areas, including prevention of cardiovascular issues, looking at brain health, looking at mentation, cognitive ability. And so they looked at those, studies that looked at this as well. This is another what we call meta-analysis, where you look at multiple studies that have studied this kind of already, and they're kind of reevaluating the data. And they found that there was strong and consistent evidence that taking a daily multivitamin containing more than 20 essential micronutrients can help prevent memory loss and slow down cognitive aging. So we get sharper brains for longer. And this belief that those vitamins and minerals, since they're being supplemented, it allows the body's brain cells to function better, function longer, have less death, increased performance, and so forth. So the study also, interesting enough, looked at cocoa, like the cocoa bean they use to make coffee, because we know coffee has a lot of benefits as well. And they looked at if you supplemented people with cocoa beans every day, was there any improvement in heart health, brain health, and the like? And what they found is that those who took cocoa didn't really see a significant reduction in cancer or cardiovascular disease. So interesting in itself. But they did see the multivitamins were able to show a benefit in reducing cognitive decline. People could remember things longer, had sharper brains. And then when they tested people over a period of time after they've been taking daily supplements of multivitamins. So yeah, the multivitamin thing, I think while not critical, but it's, I think, definitely a good idea, especially if you're not consistent with your diet. And this study here, does prove that there are some definite benefits to multivitamin supplementation, especially when it comes to brain health and reducing cognitive decline. So if you see yourself forgetting things a little more frequently, you may want to start taking your multivitamins, your daily multivitamins. Take it back to the old school, guys. All right, so let's talk about another supplementation that's very popular, and that's testosterone. Testosterone, of course, is the hormone that's produced particularly in men and women, but it's definitely more predominant in men. And it's believed to be the sex hormone. It gets, your libido up, helps with actually muscle development, bone development, and so forth. So testosterone is something that as we age starts to decline, and that's considered natural. But some people have a condition known as hypogonadism, which is when their testes, which is what produces testosterone, particularly in men, starts to have significant reduction in testosterone levels, causing people to, it's believed that people get more lethargic, they get tired, they get weaker, their libido drops, meaning they don't have the desire to have intercourse. So it can be problematic, especially if you're getting older and you really still want to be active, but you don't really have the drive to do so. So testosterone has been something that has been supplemented. People have been taking it. Now, there's been a lot of controversy with testosterone because it's believed that there's a concern that there could be an increase in heart attack risk or clot or stroke by using it. And there was a very popular study that occurred about 15 years ago where they were studying testosterone, and then this concern arose. The study was prematurely stopped. And so it was kind of a thing that's been kind of in the air for the past 10 years in the medical community. So now there's some new data coming out that shows that maybe testosterone is actually safe and it has no real significant association with heart risk, heart attack, or other issues. And maybe actually safe, especially those who suffer from low testosterone levels. So what they did was look at about 5,200 people between the ages of 45 and 80. And these people who had low testosterone levels, and they had signs of, hypogonadism, which is like decreased libido, they were tired all the time, decreased strength, and so forth. And they also had those who had a history of cardiovascular disease as well. So they looked at folks who were technically high risk for heart events. And they were assigned about, 101 to receive either testosterone or receive a placebo, which is, again, nothing, just a sugar pill. And they looked at people, the endpoint people who were taken off the study was if they determined they were having active prostate cancer. So this study particularly looked at prostate cancer risk in those who were taking this particular medication. And so what they found was that the incidence of prostate cancer did not differ significantly at all between the two groups. So cancer risk was almost negligible for those taking testosterone. So that's actually something that is a big deal, because this had been considered one of the biggest concerns with testosterone was a marked increased risk of cancer. And the data just doesn't show that. And again, this is overall percent was very low. Those who were found to have cancer, only 0.19%. So very low. I mean, less than a 0.5%. I mean, just so low. And then those who did not take testosterone, their risk of prostate cancer was 0.12%. So just extremely low risk in general. Testosterone people slightly higher, but still outrageously low. So definitely not a big deal as far as increased risk of cancer with those on testosterone. So yes, in this same study, they looked at, patients who had already had cardiovascular history and were also having signs of hypogonadism, and they used them to study how they responded to testosterone. And again, there was no increase in cardiovascular events, even in these patients who had high risk because they already had pre-existing heart issues. So I think this is definitely, a great sign in the sense that, testosterone, which has been associated with cancer, increased risk, and heart disease increases, it's been seen that there is really no significant risk, and you still have those benefits of testosterone, which many people, who like to use it say that they benefit, including improved sexual activity, improved libido, and so forth. So, I think, with the whole cancer and heart issues being debunked, I think you're going to see a lot more people promoting testosterone use, and, it's possible that it could be something that, may be more commonly prescribed by doctors to clients who are interested in this. Now, one thing that was found was that if you're using testosterone, you will get increase in your blood cell count. Your hemoglobin will go up, your hematocrit will go up. This condition is known as polycythemia vera. So this condition actually is one of the things that's been increased or associated with clots and forming potential, blockages in your circulation. So it's recommended if you're taking testosterone, you start noticing your hemoglobin and your hematocrit is increasing, you may want to consider starting to donate blood regularly, or, doing something that will help decrease your blood levels. So, but again, talk to your doctors if you're on something, or if you want to actually see a doctor, you can come to our clinic as well, Health and Wellness, Health is Wealth Wellness. And you can definitely send me an email if you're interested in potentially signing up with us, and we can definitely get you started, especially if you're in the Texas area. So testosterone may be something you may see more commonly prescribed now that the new data is out. Now, let's talk about something. We talked about cancer briefly, but cancer is something that, we're seeing some interesting numbers on as well. So overall, cancer mortality in the United States has continued to decline. It's believed that over 4 million cancer deaths were averted since 1991 due to the treatments and different things that are helping reduce cancer's deadliness. So that's a good thing. So the cancer, less people are dying from cancer. So that's good. Now, the bad thing is that there's much new cancer being diagnosed, especially in young people. So it's believed that in 2024, new cancer diagnoses are going to top 2 million. So that's about 5,400 cancer diagnoses each day that are new. And one person every 15 seconds is diagnosed with cancer. So, and this is the United States particularly we're talking about here. So cancer is very prevalent, and all the things that we've talked about here, especially when it comes to different medications, foods, diets, behavior, is to help reduce your cancer risk. Not sleeping well, eating poorly, not exercising, just not taking care of yourself. You're going to increase your risk of cancer with all these activities. And it's believed that, cancer rates are going up despite the cancer deaths going down. So there's something going on here, guys. We're being exposed to carcinogens. We're getting cancer. Now, the treatments are improving and people are not dying from it as often, but they're still dying and people are still getting it. So we want to reduce cancer completely. So I like the preventative route, and it's a lot cheaper, and it's, typically leads to better outcomes. So this study is concerning when it comes to this new cancer risk increasing. And it's believed that between 2015 and 2019, the new cancer rates increased about 1% annually. This is for breast cancer, pancreas cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer, melanomas, prostate cancer. So, prostate cancers were up 2 to 3% annually. So this is something going on here that people are getting cancer more frequently and younger. So it's kind of an interesting and very concerning, I think, shift in the overall prevalence of cancer. Younger people are getting it, and they're getting it more frequently. And it's believed that obesity is probably contributing to why these cancer rates are going higher. We do know obesity is associated with cancer. People who are obese tend to have higher risks of cancer. So when people are getting bigger, it makes sense that you see younger people who are also getting bigger, getting more cancer. So, a lot of things that we have to try to do prevent cancer: weight loss, health, wellness, taking care of your body, things you can do to help reduce your cancer risk. Now, the good news is that if you do get cancer, you may have better outcomes because of the new treatments, but hopefully you have good insurance because it won't be cheap. And that's one thing about America. If you got to pay for healthcare and you got to pay a lot. So, that has its advantages and disadvantages, but ultimately when it comes to cancer treatment, that's one of the most expensive things you can deal with when it comes to the healthcare in the United States. So, so again, cancer rates going up, cancer deaths going down. Interesting phenomenon. All right, guys, so another study here looks at adequate protein intake in midlife and how that's now being seen to be associated with healthy aging, especially when it comes to plant protein. So in short, protein is one of the most important things your body needs to sustain itself, keep cells healthy, keep muscle density high. So if you're not eating enough protein, you're going to age poorly, according to this study. So this study looked at, people who ate certain foods and the ratios of what they ate, looking at plant protein versus animal protein versus carbohydrates versus fats. And the people who ate more of one category than the other, especially when it comes to eating more carbs and fats, they tend to have worse outcomes when it comes to their overall health, especially as they aged. Those who had more plant protein in their diet tend to have healthier aging. And when we say healthy aging, we mean aging without chronic illness or without illnesses that are debilitating and reducing your quality of life. So, and plant proteins specifically, we're talking about like peas, beans, lentils, tofu, whole grains, seeds, nuts, things that are natural, high in fiber, high in protein. And, it's been seen that those who consumed more of those foods had much better long-term healthy outcomes. And it's believed that the antioxidants, the anti-inflammatory polyphenols in these foods are all helpful in reducing those chronic illnesses that tend to develop as we age. Now, animal protein was also associated with improved quality of life, but you had increased risk of cardiovascular disease in those people found to be consuming large amounts of animal protein. So this is why protein is good. Animal protein is actually good as well, but plant protein is best. And especially when it comes to reducing chronic illness, plant protein was found to be most superior. Now, of course, give a shout out to the researchers behind this study. This one particularly was done by Andres Artisan Korat, a nutritional epidemiologist at the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center at Tufts University, Boston, Massachusetts. So very prestigious facility. And this was also published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. So again, very high level stuff here, guys. You're welcome. But either way, this study again shows that plant protein is really important. So if you're someone who, doesn't like plant protein for some reason, you're some sort of a, I know one guy I see on TikTok, he promotes the meat diet where they're eating just nothing but meat, just pure meat because they feel that's the best thing to eat. Protein is good. So, he has good muscles, but ultimately the cardiovascular risk and even diabetes risk associated with heavy animal protein consumption can negate some of those other benefits, especially long term. So plant protein is very important, guys. So make sure you're looking at incorporating more plant proteins in your diet because it's been shown to be extremely beneficial when it comes to reducing, the risk of chronic illnesses as we age. All right, guys, so that's the end of the show this week. I'm very, very happy you guys tuned back in. We're going to have a lot more content for you in 2024. We are excited, guys. We have so many things on the pipeline, And we're so excited to share with you guys here. So just stay tuned to the Health and Wellness Connection. Again, if you want to reach out to myself, the host, please hit me up on the interwebs. Email is drbarryhealth@gmail.com. Instagram is drbarrymd. TikTok, Dr. Barry Health. And of course, Cash App, $ Dr. Barry Health. So again, appreciate all the love, all the support. Share the show to your friends. Thanks for listening. I'm out. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Health and Wellness Connection podcast and radio show. For more information on ways to get healthy, please check us out. www.anchor.fm/HW Connection. Here you can re-listen to the show, check out older shows, and even further support the show by becoming a subscriber to the podcast. Please check us out today. Again, that's anchor.fm/HW Connection. And also, don't forget to follow Dr. Barry on Instagram @drbarrymd. Until next time, stay healthy.